Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, Jay Goltz, Lena McGuire, and William Vanderbloemen talk about their best days as business owners and their worst days. Not surprisingly, it's the worst days that often remain the most vivid, both for the pain they inflict and the lessons they bestow. For Lena, it was the day she felt so exhausted and overwhelmed that she knew she had reached her breaking point and had to do something different. For William, it was when the pandemic hit and he had to lay off almost half of his staff in one day over Zoom. And for Jay, it was realizing that several young employees he'd tried to lift up were just not going to make it. Of course, the most inspiring part of these stories is what the owners did to learn from them and to rise above them. And then there's the day Lena returned from spending most of this past January unplugged to find that a whole bunch of things had fallen into place during her absence. My business, she tells us, was running without me for the first time in my life. It felt so good. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. In fact, that's the whole idea behind the 21 Hats community, engaging with other owners to get the kinds of insights only another owner can offer. If you're interested in learning more, step one is to sign up for a free trial of the Morning Report, which highlights the most important news of the day for business owners so you don't have to go looking for it. Step two is to get on our Slack channel, where you can ask questions, get vendor recommendations, and tap the wisdom of a very impressive crowd. Just search the 21 Hats Morning Report to subscribe. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Jay Goltz, CEO of the Goltz Group, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. Lena McGuire, CEO of Spoka Kitchen and Bath, which is based in Camillus, New York, and designs and manages home remodeling projects, especially for those looking to age in place. And William Vanderbloemen, CEO of Vanderbloemen Search Group, a Houston-based recruiting firm that works with churches and other faith-based organizations. The episode is titled, I Am Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. Welcome, Jay, Lena, and William. It's great to have you all here. Lena, you made your first appearance here a few weeks ago. For anyone who missed it, can you remind us what it is you do?
I am the owner of Spoka Kitchen and Bath, a boutique kitchen and bath design firm, soon to be a showroom in the central New York area. And I specialize in a demographic that is nearing retirement or in retirement, and I help them with wanting to stay in their homes forever. So I am a certified CAPS, which is a certified aging in place specialist. So I try to make people's homes a happy place for them and a safe place.
How's it going so far?
Well, the new year's been great. I signed 3 new accounts just last week, which was wonderful.
Wow, congrats. Can you give us a sense of what your goals are for this year? What are you hoping to accomplish?
I would like to get into a showroom situation. So I'm currently looking to lease a space. I'm right now in a 370 square foot professional office building. And I want to get into a showroom model so that my customers can see what products they're going to be buying. I have an administrative assistant right now, but I'm going to be hiring some support staff like a CAD drafter. I need to hire a receiving warehouse, things like that. So getting ready to grow and hopefully increase my income.
I would say this, something's happening in Chicago. I presume it's happening everywhere. Dental practices are being bought up by private equity. And as a result, you're starting to see storefronts all over the place, including my father's old dime store now is a dental practice. The private equity guys know, put it on the first floor in a store because it's worth paying extra rent. So what you're describing is pretty much the same thing. Yeah, it makes sense you shouldn't be in an office. You should be in a storefront because the amount of business you'll pick up from being in a storefront should easily justify the rent. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the first floor makes even more sense because you probably have people that don't want to navigate stairs or elevators.
That's true. And right now the building I'm in has a ramp on one side and some small steps on the other side. So I can accommodate people who want to get in quickly and people who need to use their walker or wheelchair. So that's a little bit of an issue, is trying to make sure that we have that zero clearance entry for some of my customers.
I've got a store right there in the design district, right by the Merchandise Mart. And down the block, there is a designer showroom that does something with kids. I don't know what they do is the point. they've just got their name on the front window with nothing else. And I think it's critical if you have a storefront to figure out what your tagline is so that people go, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I'll stop in this place. I've been down there for 5 years. I still have no clue what they do. And all they'd have to do is put designer kitchens or Europe. I don't know what they do, so I can't even make up their line, but there is no line. So I think when you do get the storefront, you really need to take best advantage of the front window and come up with a very tight, poignant, get it, right across tagline that when people drive by, they think, oh, we should stop in there.
Jay, last time you were on, you told us that you thought you were going into a bakery, and it turned out it was a dispensary.
Well, it was a dispensary bakery. It was both.
Maybe you're not paying enough attention to the signage at these places.
It didn't say anything on the outside. They looked at me and they felt the need to immediately say, you realize this is no, but I'm just saying people that aren't used to retail don't realize that putting something in your front window is critical to taking full advantage of your retail space. And I see it all over the place all the time. Like the new thing now is, oh, it's sunny, so they put a shade down and cover the entire front windows when they're closed. So you don't even know what they do. Hundreds of cars drive by every night that they should have the windows open. It's just kind of surprising. And there's lots of that around Chicago.
Lena, is there a lot of commercial space available?
There is. I took some time this weekend and drove around town, and I looked at a few towns, surrounding areas, and there are probably 5 or 10 places that would be suitable. Of course, I have my preferences, and I'd like to be closer to home and have an affordable rent and space that has a couple of front windows that I can use for displays. Because like Jay says, it's very important to show and display. And even when, we're not working there, I still want people to see the kitchens and the bathrooms and get an idea of what's going on behind that door.
Well, you hit the word there. You said affordable rent. That's a tricky word, affordable. It's not really about being affordable. It's cost effective, meaning if you find a great location that's right near an extremely busy thing, it will absolutely be worth paying another $1,500 a month to be there. So you have to calibrate what affordable means. Like it needs to be cost effective. So I would frankly change the word to cost effective because there's some locations that'd be well worth paying twice the rent if you're, right by where the customers are going.
Right. And that's one of the calculations I'm trying to figure out with the square footage. How much do I have to earn per square foot to cover that? And for me, this is very scary. Being basically a startup, it's like, okay, the difference between $2,000 a month and $5,000 a month is pretty significant.
But this is where people get themselves in trouble. They talk to their advisor who's an accountant, and the accountant will go, oh, you should do the two at lower overhead. You know what? That might be the worst advice in the world because in that example, $36,000 a year might make the difference between doing $1 million a year out of there or $300,000. It's really insignificant. So, yeah, it's about traffic flow, neighborhoods, who else is down there, and it's tricky. But like the first instinct of many people, listen, it was me. I opened up on a third floor walk-up loft. I was paying $200 a month because I didn't know if it was going to work. So that came out to like $1 a square foot. Now I'm like paying $35 a foot. I own the building, luckily, but still.
Yeah, we're at about $25 a square foot here. So it's not too bad. For me, it's a mindset shift.
Yes.
Because I do understand the value of having the space. And I've been working on that for the last few months as I've made the decision to move out into a bigger space where I can have more displays. I know I have to do it. It's just pulling the trigger and really being comfortable with it. So I'm comfortable with being uncomfortable and I'm moving forward. Hopefully I'll have that lease signed within the month.
That's funny. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say it's about being uncomfortable. So you figured that out. All right. You're making good progress.
William, how are you doing? How's your year getting started?
Well, our business is a lumpy business, right? We don't sell 50,000 widgets a year. All that's to say, we got off to a really, really great start in January, but that's kind of like being ahead. If the Cubs are ahead in the first inning, who cares?
All right, stop picking on the Cubs there.
It's just for you, Jay.
I know.
No, really robust year, and for a lot of different reasons. I have a dashboard that I look at every day, and it's kind of like, how are we compared to this period last year? Like incoming marketing leads, proposals sent, contracts sent, sales made, phone calls, all this. How are we against this week last year, this day last year, this quarter last year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I either get a green or a red on all of them, and everything's green right now. So it's early in the year, but I like the start.
All right. Well, here's the main thing I want to talk about today. We recently did an episode where Paul Downs talked about knowing he was going to have to lay off some people, and you could really hear the pain in his voice. Not something he was looking forward to, but part of what we all recognize is what it means to own and run a business. It made me think it would be interesting to kind of compare notes on our best and worst days owning and running businesses. You know, those days tend to stick out. They're the ones that we remember. They're not always representative, but I think it's meaningful. And I think to our audience, hearing what you guys have been through and managed to keep going and what has driven you to keep going could really make a difference. So, Lena, could we start with you? You've been in business for a shorter time than William or Jay, but I'm guessing you already have had some ups and downs. Do you have a day that you think of as your worst day?
Oh, I do. The day that was probably closest to ever having a nervous breakdown. I was absolutely totally overwhelmed. I had too many projects going on. I didn't have them timed out so that I could do them in a good amount of time. So I was working with deadlines that were practically impossible. I had been working for 2 or 3 days straight with very little sleep, skipping meals. Like I said, nearing a nervous breakdown. I just had too much on my plate and I had no one to help me. So I had to call clients and I had to tell them that I was behind and that I would have to reschedule their upcoming appointments because there was no way I would be prepared. It was embarrassing. My business was a mess. My personal life was becoming a mess. And I was reaching my breaking point. I just kind of got in the fetal position and was crying because I just was exhausted and overwhelmed and didn't know what to do.
How long ago was that?
That was about 1.5 years ago.
And how did you get out of it?
I vowed that day that I was going to change what I was doing. I hired a business coach. I learned how to use my calendar. I learned what my capacity was so that I know not to schedule more than 6 projects at a time and to start them 1 per week so that I use the calendar to know when things should happen, when they shouldn't. I hired an administrative assistant as a 1099 person, so not somebody I had to pay full time, but somebody I could pay to work as the work was required. So, yeah, I got my act together.
Can I guess you learned how to say no through this period?
I did learn how to say no. It's my new favorite word.
Yeah, that is part of the learning process. Can't do everything for everybody.
The other part was qualifying my customers. So I have a good fit meeting. So we have a discovery call to find out if what they are asking me to do is something I can do. Is it in a time frame that I can do? Is it in a budget range that can be accomplished? And is the team able to be pulled together to accomplish this? So just getting the answers to those 4 things has been night and day. So now I work with customers who are a good fit, and I don't work with customers who are not a good fit because everybody is unhappy.
I would think one of the major things in your business when you say you're going to help people, renovate their house to, so they can stay in it forever. I don't know whether that's $50,000 or $500,000. So I have to believe you have to get rid of the people who think it's going to be $50,000 because you can't do it. So as far as qualifying, that seems to be a critical piece, I would think.
It depends on what they want to do, because if they just need to make it so that they can bathe, we can do a shower conversion for like $8,000. But it depends on what their plans are and how much has to be done. So, we work through those details and figure it out.
William, how about you? Do you have a day you think of as your worst day as an owner?
Yeah, that's easy. It goes back, 5 years ago now when we had the lockdowns with the pandemic, very early on. So for those listening for the first time, we're an executive search firm, and we help teams that are values-based find their C-suite. And we started by saying, can we help churches find a pastor faster and better? And then it grew to schools, and then to nonprofits, and then values-based for-profit businesses like the Chick-fil-A's of the world, that sort of thing. 5 years ago, easily the majority of our client base was churches and schools. And that's diversified a little bit now, but then it was real. Well, when the lockdown started, it was actually, you're on spring break, we're just going to take 1 more week off. That's the way most schools happen. And it was right around Easter, and it was like, well, we're still going to have Easter. But then it got serious, and we realized, we're in this for a little while. And I read a paper that was amazing. Business owners should go read it now for the next time something happens. It's called Leading Beyond the Blizzard. It's written by a group called Praxis, Praxis. Very, very important paper. Don't read it right before you go to bed. I did, and I didn't sleep. And basically it asked the question, when these lockdowns started, you need to decide right now, small business owner, do you think this is a bad winter storm that's going to have us staying at home for, a week or two? Is it a blizzard where we're out of commission for a month or a couple months? Or is it a mini ice age, which historically those last, about a year and a half, something like that? And you need to decide right now which one it is and then build your plan around that. So I thought about it and said, well, I'm going to go with the mini ice age. This feels like it's going to be here a while. And then I sort of intuitively ran the numbers and decided if we're really shut down, if churches and schools are shut down for a long period of time, that's going to affect our business. I called a few clients, and long story short, I decided, my gut told me, we have to cut 40% of our overhead. We don't have supply chain like Jay. We don't have, hard goods. So overhead is people for us. And that's painful. So my COO, who's Harvard Business School and actually knows business, said, let me go do some calculations and some formulas over the weekend, and then I'll come back and we'll decide. He came back and said, I've studied it. I think we need to cut 39.8% of our overhead. And I said, oh, that's a great number. Let's go with that, which is a whole nother podcast on the founder's gut versus science, right? But we landed on 40%, and we made the decision, for good or bad, that we would rather just do this all at once than do a little bit of firing each month for months on end. And so that Thursday, we sent word to our team, say, hey, Friday is going to be a hard meeting, but we need everybody there. And that's when we do our all staff. So that Friday, probably the last Friday in March, we said, we're cutting 40% of the staff. We're going to have calls with people. Of course, we did try to package people out well, but it was a very, very, very sad day because these were all friends, and we didn't have any underperformers at the time. It was all good people, but it was really hard.
How big was your staff at the time?
I think we were about 42 full-time staff.
So you had to cut about 10 people?
No, more like 18. That was hard. That was really hard. And honestly, we should have just shut the business down altogether if I were really thinking clinically. But we decided we'd cut 40% and then try and serve these people that were trying to figure out the world and do it at no cost, things like PPP and that sort of thing. And if we die, we die with our boots on. And it worked out fine. But that day, I don't ever want to have to live through that day again. It was horrible.
Did you actually tell them all we're going to have a really hard meeting on Friday? Did you actually tell them that beforehand?
Yes.
And I'm just asking why, because it seems to me that would make them not sleep.
We weren't dumb. Churches were canceling Easter. That's the first time in Christendom that's ever happened. I mean, the word unprecedented is tired by now.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, crap. They're going to be closed, and they're certainly not going to be hiring, and they're certainly not going to be paying a firm to help them hire. So this is bad. How are we going to deal with it?
So by telling them that, you felt like you were giving them a little warning, and they wouldn't be okay. I guess
fair warning. Obvious. And then we had a very brief all-staff meeting. We're going to drop everything on the agenda. Let me tell you what's going to happen and why it's going to happen. And then your team leaders are going to contact you, each of you, to let you know how this affects you personally. And it was hard.
How many of those people did you bring back since then?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think we brought anybody back as a person. We brought positions back. We're probably twice as big now as we were then, maybe a little more than that. And we're at right at 40 full-time headcount. So we have learned necessity is the mother of invention, right? So through that and people getting used to using virtual meetings and that sort of thing, we've figured out how to do our work more efficiently. And it's kind of a whole new day. Fortunately, most of those people found good jobs, and I don't know that pulling them out of a job to come back would have been the healthiest thing.
I find that fascinating that not one of them came. So you think the case is most of them found jobs that suited them better? And my next question is, or do you think some of them just were a little pissed about the whole thing?
I'm sure they were all mad about it.
Right. Well, that explains. Yeah.
I don't think they were mad to the point of I'll never work for him again. It's kind of like you get mad when a relative has cancer, but you don't blame the doctor. You know, it was what it was. And I mean, 2020 is the only year we've not had top line growth ever. And it was terrible. I don't know how we got through it. But that day where you're talking to people where we worked together pretty closely and had a really great culture, that was hard.
You knew you were doing what you had to do. Is there a particular moment that sticks out in your mind as being most painful?
I think, honestly, this is going to sound drama or it's going to come out the wrong way, but I think the hardest part of it was that I wasn't with any of them. We were all locked down. So it was a Zoom meeting. That was the hardest part for me.
I could see that.
Although it's interesting, it sounds like you're saying you have a stronger business today as a result of that lockdown.
Yeah, we do.
You also said that maybe you should have just shut the whole business down. If looking back on it, if you had it to do over again, is that something you would seriously contemplate?
Let me say it again and try and get it a little better. I think if I were purely in my business for having the most profitable, efficient business that made the most amount of money, then the smartest move would have been to say, hey guys, we know nobody's going to be hiring for a year and a half, so we're closing our doors. We'll reopen when this is better, and just let everybody go. That would have been, I would have made more money that way probably. But, you know, I didn't start the business for the money. I started it because people that are trying to do good in the world need great staff. And, I'm a recovering pastor. I guess I still have that in me. And I saw these churches that were flailing, trying to figure out how to help really hurting people in a really hard time. And I thought, let's keep what we can. We're going to completely pivot, another tired word. And we're not doing searches anymore, but we'll help people figure out, how do I do online church? How do I do online school? How do I do payroll protection plan for the very weird tax code that clergy is? And we kind of just got on that and said, we're just going to serve. And we're going to do it because it's a good thing. And then secondarily, if we get through this, we will have a lot of people that are very close friends because of what we've done.
The fact of the matter is, though, maybe you did come out better doing it this way.
I know we did.
I'm just saying, you said you would have made more money if you just closed down, but maybe not. I mean,
maybe not, Jay. You're right. I mean, of the 90,000 faith-based organizations that receive PPP money, any faith, right? 30,000 of them came directly to us for help, and only about 2,000 of them were people we knew. So if you help people get 10 weeks of free payroll during a crisis, they tend to remember you and call you when they need things in the future. But we didn't know that. We made the decision that we're going to do what's right, and we'll trust that it'll work out. And then it's been maybe the best decision we've fallen into in the history of the company.
Jay, what was your worst day?
That's a tough call, but I can think of one. When I started in my $200 a month, third floor walk-up loft, I was 22. My father had a dime store around the corner, and he knew all the neighborhood kids, so he sent the neighborhood kids by me. So I hired these 3 kids that were in high school still to help me with the framing in the beginning. And, the 2 of them were brothers, and the father abandoned them, and they were going to get thrown out of high school. And I went to the local high school, and I talked to the counselor there and said, don't throw them out, blah, blah, blah. And they said to me, which at 68 means much different to me back then, he said, thank you for caring. And I didn't realize, I'm sure they were thrilled somebody cared about these kids. So I was going to drag these kids up with me. So this goes on for a year and a half, 2 years. And then one day there was a big order had to get done, and one of them started to flake out on me. He had a girlfriend who actually worked for me, and it was being a whole big mess. And an order didn't get delivered when it was supposed to. And I can remember like yesterday, which surprised me, sitting in my office, and I just cried. And I realized that I put my heart and soul into this, and I failed. Now, one of those 3 kids is now 60 years old and still works for me, and is, he's like my little brother. But the other 2 just flaked out. And the business lesson from it, if I had the mentor, the business coach, somebody would have said, Jay, just because you want to make something out of somebody doesn't mean they either want it or have the ability to do it. And I was trying to drag them along with me, and I put everything I had into it, and I failed. Now, flash forward 20 years, kid shows up, it's 20 years later. And I barely recognized him because he was twice the size he was when he left. And I was able to get an opportunity most people in this life don't get. I was actually able to ask him. I said to him, I go, I got to ask you. Now, keep in mind, at the time this all happened, I was 28. He was probably 18. Now I'm 48 and he's, 38. I said, did you recognize I was trying to drag you up with me as we were growing the company? And I was looking out for your own best interests and blah, blah. And he looks at me and he goes, yeah, I realized that. I go, why didn't you come back? He goes, it was too late.
What do you think he meant by that?
I think he had screwed up so bad that, first of all, I probably would have taken it back had he come back. But just because you want somebody to, this is a problem in small business. It is unlikely that those few people you hired when you first opened are going to be helping you run your company when you have 100 people. It is just unlikely they've got the skill set to grow along with that. So that story about, so-and-so, he started on the loading dock, that absolutely happens for sure. But for every one of those, there's 3 more of them that, it didn't work. It was an important life lesson that, especially when you're dealing with kids, just because you want somebody to be successful and you want them to take more responsibility and you want them to be part of your quote-unquote management team, doesn't mean they have the desire or ability to do it. So that was a bad, and like I said, I was surprised at myself because I just was by myself. I remember like yesterday, I was sitting in the office by myself and I just started crying and I realized I was spent.
Lena, do you have a best day?
I do have a best day, but I have to tell you, these guys are scaring me because I'm not to their level yet. And the hiring and firing, as worst days, I have those ahead of me. I'm not looking forward to that too much, but good coaching and good camaraderie here, so we'll get through it. Best day, I have to tell you, it was quite recently. I only worked 7 days in January. I went away for the holidays, and then I came back for 2 days, and then I went on a 2-week vacation. And when I came back, my business systems and processes were working. I had 3 new client checks hit my checking account. So I had deposits for 3 new projects. I had cabinet orders come in for 2 large kitchens. They had been scheduled and confirmed for home delivery, coordinated with the warehouse, the client, the contractor, added to my calendar so that I could be there for delivery day if I wanted to be there. My administrative assistant scheduled me for 3 speaking engagements at the local library in April and had confirmed some dates for September for 3 more. And we heard back from another library to do some additional presentations at this place that I hadn't been at. I had an in-home consultation appointment coming up later in the week that had been confirmed and a new appointment set for later in February. All this happened while I was on a cruise with my sisters. My business was running without me for the first time in my life. It felt so good.
You need to take more vacations.
Apparently. Yeah. So all the stuff that I'd been working very hard at to get those systems and processes together and get the right person in that admin position, all that came to fruition. And I can't tell you what a great feeling it was to just check my email when I came home and see, oh, look, you had a deposit in your checking account.
You weren't even checking your email while you were away?
I was 100% disconnected. Yeah, when I'm on vacation, I don't answer the phone. I don't check the email, nothing. I need to vacate.
Wow.
So all this was happening without me. I was kind of proud of myself and very relieved that all the hard work I'm putting in is actually paying off. So I believe that the business will continue to grow because something is working.
There's little greater joy than watching an employee that you hired, and trained, and mentored to see them blossom and do wonderful things. I have it on a daily basis here, and I hope everyone that has good employees appreciates that because it's a beautiful thing.
William, when was the first time you were able to work only 7 days in a month?
That's been a long journey. A lot of search firms, consulting firms are personality dependent. We want William or we want Jay or Lauren to do the work. And as founder, and then again, another podcast, but with the name on the door, which I didn't care to do, but did, my concern is that the thing dies with me. So I call it a sustainability plan more than a transition or succession plan, but the company's got to be able to live and breathe and function without me. Now, when I wrote my first book on succession, which would have been 11 years ago now, I started saying, let's try to see how the business functions without me for a little bit more time every summer. Summer tends to be a little slower. Schools are closed. A lot of people are on vacation. It's just, I think all businesses slow down then. So last summer, I think I was gone 11 or 12 weeks. I was supposed to have a once a week phone call with our COO, and we probably did that half the time. And I think the longest one was 20 or 30 minutes. So it did a very slow, intentional move toward me not having to be the keystone in the archway, if that makes sense. Probably we could grow faster if I weren't doing that. Probably we would be, booming a little bit more if I were just in the weeds and digging, and because I've got more institutional memory than anybody here, and hopefully I'm still good at what I do. But for sustainability's sake, we've taken the last 11 years and spread that time out a little farther where the company can go on without me. And the first marker was, can it function without me? And we got there about, probably right before the pandemic. And then obviously 2020, everything changed. But in about 22, we got to a new marker where the company can grow without me being involved. And that's a whole different thing. So we're still figuring it out as we go, but that doesn't really answer your question, does it?
It comes close. Lena, I'm curious. William's obviously at a very different stage. Did you have any trepidation about taking that much time away from a startup?
No, because it's typically very slow for me from November till March.
That makes sense.
And because I didn't have a full pipeline, remember the last episode, I'm struggling with that pipeline and working with my marketing. So I didn't have the new business coming in. I was at that lull where all the design work was done, all the orders were placed. We're just waiting for all the products to come in before the construction starts. So I typically have an 8-week lull with projects like that. So I had a couple of kitchens coming in. So there wasn't a lot of design work to be done. So it was a slow time for me. So I could definitely schedule my vacation at that point.
Well, you may just be a lot smarter than I am, because I wasn't smart enough to do that as early as you're doing it. When I was at your stage of the business, I was taking every single call. I was doing every sales call. I mean, in an unhealthy way. I remember we finally got to the point where we had enough frequent flyer miles and such that we took the kids to Disney. We stood in line for the Dumbo ride forever with our littlest one, who was probably, 2 or 3 at the time. And right when it was our turn, a sales lead came in, and I, of course, took it and started on the phone. And Adrian looked at me and said, "What in the world are you doing right now?" And I said, "I'm doing the thing that paid for the Dumbo ride." And that was a tense moment.
Yeah, that's hard. So I make a conscious decision. So I don't know if I've said this before, but I have calendared my whole year, and travel is very important to me, and seeing my family. I have travel scheduled already, so I know when I can work and when I can't. And I've also scheduled my business, so I work 20 hours in my business and 20 hours on my business, because I'm not a young person anymore, and I have goals for my business, so I have to work hard to move it forward. So I'm being conscious. And this is my second business. I was a graphic designer for 22 years, so I did run a business before. So I'm stepping into this one with a little bit more experience than the first one, and I have bigger goals this time. So I'm working hard to achieve those.
William, what was your best day? Was it the Dumbo ride?
The Dumbo ride was a great day. It is really hard to distill what the best day is, because I don't know if Jay's got more miles as a business owner than I do, but it feels, Lauren, like I've probably launched about 7 different companies, even though I've only launched this one, because we've had different iterations. When we expanded from churches to churches and schools, we expanded from large churches to normal sized churches. Anytime we've expanded the work into a new vertical, those days are the most fun. I think because I'm a serial entrepreneur who's just started one company, but added things along the way. Does that make sense?
Sure. Does one of those days stand out for you?
Well, there's a lot of satisfaction in finishing a really complicated search. And that's more about the art of what we do than owning the business. So that doesn't really help listeners so much. But when we see a client, like we did a succession and search for a person that was going to replace a founding pastor at maybe the largest church on the West Coast, certainly the most influential, that could have gone wrong 100 different ways, and it went well. And that was pretty special. Some of the days during the pandemic when we were able to help people that didn't know what they were doing, that was pretty special. There are a lot of cool moments. I don't know that I could distill it to one.
Understood.
I'm also learning that I get far more out of an interview if I refrain from superlative questions. And that may be a term I made up, but tell me your best, tell me your worst. That really corners candidates, and it makes them anxious. So that's a a rabbit trail of a bit, but maybe it helps some owners out there. Don't say what's your best accomplishment. What's something you're proud of you've done? Tell me about a day you went home and you thought, we got it right that day.
That's a good question.
Especially in a podcast where I'm asking you for your best and worst.
Well, you're paralyzing me, Lauren. I can't answer.
We've demonstrated your point right here. Jay, how about you? Do you have a best day?
I hadn't thought about it just now, but my father used to always say, you put thousands into the business and you take it out in nickels. And in this case, I don't know that I could tell you the best day because I have good days all the time. I don't know that I can think of one, you got one big sale. I don't know that I can think of one particular day.
Not a day that you're proud of that you've
told me I've told the story too many times, so I'm afraid to tell it again. My Lily moment where the employee that worked for me for 10 years and was older came up to me. She had a retirement party and she walked up to me afterward and she looked me in the eye and she said, I've got to tell you something. I said, what? And she said, when you hired me, I never thought I'd work again. That was a life-changing day for me, that I realized that giving people jobs can really profoundly help their lives. And I never thought about it. I was torturing myself all about the ones that I shouldn't have hired and should have gotten rid of sooner. And I didn't realize those don't matter. It's the ones that you hired that worked out great, that you've given a nice job to, a meaningful job. So that was a life-changing day for sure.
Yeah, I think that's really important because if people are our biggest and most important assets, then the hiring and the firing of them is super important.
And you know what? It took me years before I thought, and how nice of her to say that to me. She didn't have to say anything. That was such a gift, but it really took the wind out of me. I never thought I'd work again. Think of the power the boss has for giving someone a job, for God's sakes. I mean, we always get blamed for, they lay people off. Yeah, there's stuff that the boss has to do that's not pretty, but there's lots of stuff we do that is pretty. We give people jobs. We give them meaning. We give them, we give them confidence. We do lots of good things if we're doing a good job. William, with me on that?
Yeah. Maybe the best day was the first day we got a contract.
Sure.
When we didn't know if the business was going to work. I remember we went and bought steaks at the grocery store that night. Yay. But the longer I do this, it's yes, we want to run a good business and we want to, make money doing it, but it's not the money as much as are we doing something that's going to make a lasting difference? And the times that we get that right is pretty fun.
And I hate when they do commercials, like you can't pick on anyone anymore, which is fine, except the boss. That's like a running joke, like the commercial with the screaming boss with his glasses bound. Like, it's not funny. It's just being a bad boss is not a funny thing. Screaming at people is not a funny thing. So I like doing speeches. I like doing this podcast to just give people some perspective of, I was screaming back in my 20s when I was completely out of control. Like, there's something beautiful about running a nice company where you're a good boss and you can nurture and develop people.
Jay, I certainly understand why that was a moving moment for you. Did it change the way you did anything?
Well, it totally changed my head in that once I figured out the way business was supposed to work, I tortured myself a little bit. Oh my God, you were so stupid doing that, or you shouldn't have done that, or you shouldn't have hired them, or from that moment on, I didn't just go from half empty to half full. I went from half empty to full. Like, I'm telling you, it was like a movie. I looked over her shoulder. There was a bunch of people still milling around eating, and I looked at every one of them, and I thought, that's the 17-year-old kid I took in who's now 37 that's making $60,000 a year. And that's somebody who, it gave me a whole new metric of feeling good about running a business.
It's also the kind of the polar opposite of your experience with the 3 kids you tried to bring along.
Absolutely. That's the point. That was the learning curve of, yes, that's the entire spectrum. On one hand, you can't drag everyone else up. You can't make people into what they don't want to be. And at the other end, you can. That's the line we're on. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work.
All right. We are out of time. My thanks to Jay Goltz, Lena McGuire, and William Vanderbloemen. As always, thanks for sharing, guys. One thing before you go. Everything we do at 21 Hats is created by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs to help us all learn together. If you get something out of listening to these podcast episodes, consider joining the conversation. You can do that by joining the 21 Hats Sounding Board, a Slack channel where you can tap the wisdom of a very smart crowd, or by becoming a founding member and joining our monthly Zoom forum, where you can be part of conversations much like the ones we have on the podcast. You can sign up for both by subscribing to the Morning Report. If you have any questions, you can email me at lauren@21hats.com. And if you get something out of this podcast or out of the Morning Report, please tell a friend, tell an enemy, tell every business owner you know. Your word of mouth, owner to owner, will always be the most effective way to build this community for all of us. Thank you. It means a lot. This episode was produced by another entrepreneur, Jess Stuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Thanks for listening, everyone.